Buenos nachos, and welcome back to the channel. I think the nachos are buenos. Buenos nachos, and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're going to be revisiting this Xbox 360 console right here. One does not simply reball the GPU, one must replace the GPU. And by replace the GPU, I mean replace it with a Jasper era GPU, which is a Zeus GPU. How many times did I say GPU? Without further ado, let's perform the final repair on this Xbox 360. And the motherboard revision on this Xbox 360 is X810387-007 or 007 in this case. This Zephyr is a revision C with a RIA GPU. In our previous video we worked on a Zephyr A with a Y1 GPU revision, X0256-010. And so this is the GPU we have. It's supposedly brand new from China. Pretty hard to check the validity on that, but well, we'll just have to take their word for it. However, there is a problem. This GPU has ROHS compliant solder, which as you know was also part of the problem with the Xbox 360s getting the red ring of death, though that is not the sole reason they have their issues. That said, let's reball this thing with some leaded solder. We're going to begin by adding some flux to this GPU. And now we're going to remove the solder that is currently on here. And you do want to try your best to remove all of the old solder. There are a few test points on this GPU that you may use in order to determine the remaining life of this GPU. If you have too low of a reading, it may be best to just replace the GPU with another. This information applies to both new GPUs and used GPUs that you've just pulled off of a console. We'll of course now be applying our Stereo Flux. It looks like we got it. When it comes to reballing these GPUs, you want to go in a circular motion. Try not to stay in one area for too long. Looks like we're already getting flow. We'll let that cool down for a little bit. And there you have it. The GPU has been reballed with leaded solder. It looks like we're ready to place this on the Xbox. First thing we have to do is remove the GPU. This process will take a couple of minutes, so we'll be back when we're ready to remove the chip. And now we'll remove this ROHS compliant solder. First we have to add some flux. And I'm just floating on top of the pads. I'm not really applying any pressure. And now we're going to use our desoldering braid to remove the remnants of the solder. Once again, I'm floating on top of the pads. I'm not applying any pressure. The reason you do not want to apply pressure is you'll start removing some of the coating. And that'll lead to bridges, which will lead to shorts and or other issues with this installation. It is, however, imperative that you remove all of the old solder. And now we'll use our tissue method to remove the spent flux. We'll perform one more cleaning pass with our distilled honey juice. And now we'll be applying some of the Steri flux. Once you've placed the GPU on, it'll lock right in. And you'll know you have it in because it'll be within the lines, or right on the lines. And now we're going to run our profile, that way we can attach this GPU to the board. And as you can see, we did replace the GPU. So here is our new GPU, X817793-001, which is the Zeus GPU. And of course the RIA, which I can't really see the markings on this one. But yep, that is the defective GPU. So at this point we do have a few components that need to be changed over and or completely removed. So we'll start with the removal process now and install our new components. We're going to remove the voltage regulator with some hot air. For inquiring minds, I'm going to be using maximum heat and maximum temperature. And it comes off just like that. We need to remove two components, R8B9 and R8B10. This way we can set the vid to 1.075 volts. And I'm just going to flood this area with some solder. It's easier to do it than it is with hot air and safer, especially since we're next to some capacitors. And these do not need to be replaced with anything, though I will clean up this flux and once again be relying on our distilled honey juice, which is devastatingly powerful enough to ruin some gloves. Now we need to set the FSB, aka the PCI/memory calibration, and the component we need to remove is R5R3. And if you take a look at the capacitor layout, there's one resistor that lie next to all the rest, and that's going to be this one right here directly in the center. We need to remove that and replace it. And now we'll go ahead and clean up this pad. Now we do have a couple options. You can install a resistor and run a wire from here to this capacitor. I am going to scratch away this masking. Clean up this area. And now we'll prep this so that it's ready for the new resistor. We will be installing a 40.2 ohm 0403 resistor. The resistors may be purchased at Mazzer or DigiKey, it is your preference. Alright, we have one side tacked down. I'm sure some of you are saying by now that I should switch to a smaller soldering iron tip, but I am going to keep using this size. Alright, and I think that looks sufficient. We'll go ahead and clear up this area with our honey juice. And now we have to remove the 1.47K ohm resistor, R4, R3. And we're not going to be replacing it with anything. Go ahead and clean up this area. And now we have two components that we need to remove topside. That'll be these two right here. R5D1 is a 562 ohm resistor, and R5D2 is a 2K ohm resistor. And both of these need to be removed. Only one of these is to be replaced. We'll firstly clean up the pads. R5D2 needs to be replaced with a 49.9 ohm resistor. I was wondering when that caffeine would finally start kicking in. And I don't really like the placement of this, but it will be connected. Alright, now to clean up our work. We have two more components to replace. These are on the back side. We have to replace the 40.2 ohm resistors at R4, R8, and R4T1 with 240 ohm resistors. You can verify the readings at the multimeter to ensure you are in the correct area and are removing the correct components. And now to clean up the area, as we do have to replace both of these components with a 240 ohm resistor. Alright, that's one side. Let's tack down this resistor before we change the orientation of this board. And now the top one. Alright, and that looks pretty good. Before we progress any further, let's clean up this area with our distilled honey juice. Now we have work to do top side. We need to run a wire from U5C1 to C5D2. I'd recommend starting with this pad because it'd be easier to maneuver your wire, because if you start over here you could potentially rip off this end of the capacitor and you do not want to do that. And we probably want to adjust that just a tad bit better. It's a little too close for comfort to that other capacitor. Yeah, it's a little bit better. We will probably have to coat this thing because I fear it may touch some stuff. Alright, I think that's going to have to be good enough for now. Let's go ahead and cut the excess off before we begin soldering. Almost thought our cutters gave up there for a second. I'd recommend you make sure this thing is nice and flush, or you may have some kind of a short with the heatsink and this line right here. We have one more upgrade to perform on this console before we can power it on. So I'll leave you with Hank and he'll show you what I mean. Look at all that dust. And our final upgrade is going to require some tools. Just kidding. It's actually going to be requiring these right here. This X-clamp modification is different than what you've seen performed by other people, and we're going to show you just what we mean. So first thing we got to do is remove these bolts. That was not going to come out of there. Guess when in doubt, use some pliers. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to make all of your bolts look like the one in my left hand right here. So you'll need to do that 8 times. And we'll do that in our threading tool right here. And when you're all done, they'll look like that. And you may need to use some cutting oil. I have a couple more to go, so most likely I will. And once you finish threading all 8 of them, you can then reattach them to the heat sinks and make sure you tighten them down good. And that, my friends, is how you eliminate the X-clamp. We've already dumped the NAND, and we've already set the console as a Jasper and JRunner. We won't be going over that process in this video. As you can see, we have Zell Reloaded running, and we can now obtain our CPU key. I just want to thank Octal450 for providing information on how to perform this mod. I've already booted up the console and I know it's working. That's why we're going to install these heatsinks first. We're going to use good old-fashioned MX4. Now you'll notice that I'm not putting any washers here. That's because Microsoft's bolts are the correct height. And now I have some nuts that you can use that are just like this. And if you can't find anything like that, you can use something like this. Though you may end up needing to use a washer because of the amount of space that it takes up. Let's get a couple of these bolts down. And there you are. No more X-clamp. Now we do have one more final upgrade to perform in order to extend the life of this console. You don't want to go through all that work of replacing the GPU only to have it last a measly year. We want this to be a permanent fix, or at least as permanent as it can be. What's the last modification, you ask? That's going to be this right here, a thermal pad. You wouldn't remove the X-clamp and replace it with a styrofoam pad, would you? No, you need something to transfer the heat. So we're going to use this thermal pad right here to transfer the heat from the chips to the chassis. You're going to want to make sure that the area you're applying these pads to is oil and dirt free, which these are. And now for the GPU. There we go. We'll finish reassembling the console and we'll boot it right up. Now we're not going to be needing these anymore. If you found this video helpful or useful, please remember to leave us a like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Until next time.